Hello and welcome to a brand new show from BSN Break Down, where we're going to look back at some of the best of the recent action and ahead to what's coming up with insights from someone who really knows what it's like on the track and under the helmet as well. Former British champion and current captain of the Berwick Bandits in 2024, Rory Schlein, and of course part of the BSN team as well. And we're going to, in this particular episode, focus largely on the Premiership and do a bit of a preview. I know the season's already a little bit up and running, but that's kind of a good way to do the preview because we've got a bit more information than we probably would have had if we'd have been starting cold. So we're going to look through all of the teams, but first of all, let's bring in Rory. And Rory, welcome to our new show. Let's talk about the Premiership overall first before we start getting involved in the nitty-gritty of the different teams. And really, we started off this season. We've had the big media day, a lot of positivity around. The riders all seem really happy. We've got some of the world's best riders back in Britain once again. And British Speedway in a good position in 2024 in the top league.
Definitely. I think the feel around this year is very, very different because a lot of the big names have come back. So I think the fans are excited. You know, even myself, I'm not riding in the top flight, but yeah, definitely exciting. And to have the big names back, you know, couldn't ask for more.
One thing that's been said quite a lot, and we'll see if people agree with this and see if you agree with this, that the phrase has come out quite a bit. This is the best Premiership for 10 years, maybe more. But where do you stand on that? Would you agree with that? And if this is the best for 10 years, going back beyond that, what is the best year for British Speedway's top flight, do you think?
Definitely a lot stronger than what I'd have to agree on that. You know, we haven't had this many we're current GP riders, former GP riders in the league. You know, we just have to look at Sheffield, Ipswich, but you're going back maybe 2008, 2007, probably the last time the league was at its top, you know, the likes of Adams, Crump, you know, all them guys. And you look at it now with Emil, Doyley, Holder brothers, Wolfie's back in town, Magic's at Oxford. You know, we just keep going, and you never know. Other riders could get the bug and join halfway through the year. Who knows?
And talking about that, obviously Emil came back last year, and that was like a big thing for him to come back. People didn't really know what to expect from him, but he was amazing and finished as the top rider in British Speedway. But his presence, and then we saw Laguta come in, for example, and then later on Woofy and Chris Holder, and riders speak to each other. So tell us about that, Rory, because, you know, word gets around pretty quickly that actually Britain's a good place to be riding again, and talk to us about how riders, you know, chat about where is a good place to ride and where maybe isn't a good place to ride.
Well, I think if you look at what's happened in Sweden, it has sort of dropped off, which is a shame, but I think their loss is Britain's gain. You know, the league's not very strong there. I know it's not taking off as what it used to, and a lot of these guys need laps, and, you know, competitive laps is exactly what they need. And you know, even if you ask someone like Doyley has always said he needs to be on the bike, always needs saddle time. And I think a lot of the other guys are starting to sort of sense that they're not getting enough competitive laps. Emil sort of pretty much, you know, I know he's dropped out of the GP, but he knows he needs to stay on the bike. And coming here to England, the thing you do, you race once, twice a week, and it keeps you sharp. And I think that's sort of, you know, worn off a little bit because Emil was one of the best riders in the world last year. And I think, you know, Wolfie's sort of realised that. I think he needs to be more on the bike. He's, you know, chopping at the bit to be riding at Sheffield. Chris enjoyed that last bit he did at last season. So, look, the incentive is there. You know, they say there's not money in Speedway or in Britain. Trust me, there is. These guys wouldn't be coming back there if there wasn't.
One thing that came out of some of the interviews that we did when we had this, you know, the big British Speedway media day, and chatting to the riders there, particularly those like Magic, like Woofy, like Chris Holder, about, you know, what is the attraction aside the money. Of course, a bit of extra money is never going to go amiss. And himself in press conferences, he likes making money, which is one of his, you know, motivations for doing anything. But they all said that it's a different challenge from riding in Poland. Poland, the tracks are reasonably similar. It's flat out, it's slick. And actually, even the Polish guys like Janowski, they've come here to ride in tricky conditions. You know, it's raining, wet, heavy tracks, really tight tracks, turning the bike harder. You know, all this kind of stuff is what they want because they feel that that's going to give them some extra skills, different skills, and ride the bike in a different way that might give them an edge when it comes to trying to qualify for the GP again.
Yeah, well, Speedway has evolved. Obviously, we've seen that. You know, the engines are different. The bikes are so much lighter. They're so much faster. But you find in Poland, it's all about keeping your wheels in line. It's all about speed and momentum. Where here in England, it's about turning, but turning fast. You know, tracks like Leicester, we were there not long ago. You know, Kings Lynn looks big, but you tend to turn really hard. You know, at Kings Lynn. Oxford, very small, very tight little technical track. But we've still got tracks like Belle Vue and Sheffield that open up to really fast and flat out racing. So that's what these guys are. They're getting a mixture. They're coming to tracks where the consistency of the tracks are different. The shapes, the styles, and how you ride them. Like as I said, it's going to keep them sharp. It's going to keep them on the edge. So when they do go back to Poland, when they do go back to the GPs, they're at their optimum, they're at their prime.
And that's what they want, of course, is to get back to that top table. But let's work our way through the teams then, Rory, in the ROWE Motor Oil Premiership, as it's now known in British Speedway. And we'll start with the reigning champions, the Sheffield Tigers, who have got a much changed team from how they started last year, but not too dissimilar to how they ended it, because they had many, many changes. There was only Kyle Howarth, wasn't there, who was the survivor from beginning to the end of the season for one reason or another, with riders either getting swapped out or injured. So he continues as captain. But you have to say, though, with two world champions in the side, that is going to be, you know, any side is going to be a formidable one with that level of talent in there, with Woofy and Chris Holder, and then a potential world champion there with Jack Holder as well.
Well, you've got three world-class riders straight off the bat. And, you know, there's Ipswich only comes close, obviously, with Emil and Doyley. But I think we've seen last year with them, with Woofy and Chris, they just, especially around Allenton, they were solid. With Jack back now, any of them can ride at number one. So however they want to set that team up, they can shift it and move it to suit how, you know, Steady's got the option of moving it around for away tracks. You know, he can talk to these guys who have got vast amount of experience. So where would you guys think you'd be better at? You know, so Steady's got, you know, a great basis of like your top three, and then I would have to say that they're pretty solid, you know, going down. Like the reserves look okay, so they're going to be handy away from home. But look, you can't look further away from the top three, and you would like to think they're going to score you 10, 12, even more points every meeting.
With that, though, we often say reserves win your meetings. In the fixtures that Sheffield have had, obviously limited. They haven't had any home fixtures at the time of recording this so far because of the weather. And they will be due to be riding pretty soon at the time of recording this, so we might get the answers to this. But the reserve pairings so far on those away fixtures haven't delivered huge points versus some of the sides they've faced. So is that a potential area when you've got a side that's fairly heavyweight at the top? You still need the reserves to chip in. We don't know what, you know, if injuries come into play and what have you. Whereas you look at some of the other sides, they've been putting bigger points away at reserve at this stage, at least.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Where I think when you have a high score, you can have just one high scoring reserve. It takes so much pressure off the rest of the team. And I think what we've seen in their first, you know, just with the challenge, I think it was a KO Cup with Belle Vue. Jack wasn't firing. He hasn't hit full stride yet. And what you've seen there is one of them have an off night. The rest of the team is so much under pressure, especially the reserves. But, you know, Jack will get back to his top form. Not sure if he's trying things at the beginning of the year. A lot of the guys do that. You know, they try different things with the engines. So for me, you know, early on, I wouldn't be too worried. But, you know, obviously someone like Jack and Chris, they'll want them scoring big. They'll want them hammering home and away. And, you know, obviously you never know. The reserves could just come into it. They could be a bit of a slow burner. but I still think with that top three, they'll be able to carry them.
On the subject of the reserves, we said that obviously they've not put the points away, but we know that they are possibly a couple of the most experienced reserve pairings in Jason Edwards and Dan Julks. Both have ridden for their country at under 21 level at least, and you know, they're talented riders. Dan riding in Poland, he's riding for PY there, which is a team managed by Hans Nielsen. So he's certainly got a lot of experience in the management camp there, and of course in Great Britain with Simon Stead as well. So you fancy that should they hit their potential, then that they are the key to really completing the set, aren't they, for Sheffield? Because you know the proven talent in that top five, you know that they're capable of scoring big points. And if the reserves chip in as well, they really could be difficult to stop.
Well, I've worked with both of them, and I've watched them obviously grow and develop. Jason, they're two sides of the coin, where one's a very aggressive and mentally strong kind of guy in Gilks, and then you've got Jason, who's very placid, smooth rider, doesn't get overly aggressive on the bike. But, I think that is good. You've got a rider that will give everything, and another rider that will be a bit more content, a little bit more patient. But they are riders that will probably take time to, as I know, as you said, they've got the experience, but they're sort of they're very confidence driven sort of riders. So Gilksy's had a few injuries in the last few years, so he'll be looking for a clean run. And I think Jason finished really well with Redcar last year, so he'll be looking to build, and obviously with Sheffield last year as well. So look, there is potential there, and if they do find a bit of confidence and form, they've got the top three. The world's an oyster if that goes that way.
This maybe should be the caption at the bottom of the screen, but is Jason Edwards the happiest speedway rider in the world? He's always happy. He's a delight to chat to. You always have a good conversation with him about anything.
I guess so. But I've never seen anyone knock him off or any upset him yet. So I hope that doesn't happen. But he just seems, like I said, he's very placid. Like nothing seems to faze him, and that could be a bit of his Achilles heel. There's not enough tiger in him and not enough aggression. But I've also seen him, take some big scalps, in the past. So again, I think confidence-based rider. See what happens.
Yeah, I can't really imagine Jason Edwards going on a rampage in the pits throwing toolboxes around, but you never know. It might happen, but yeah, at this moment in time.
Everyone has a switch, don't worry.
Your star man is fellow countryman of yours, Chris Holder, former world champion. He's had a bit of time out from British Speedway, as a number of riders have, but he, when he's on form, he's still there, isn't he? He's as good as anybody.
He's world class. He's still racing in Poland. He's still got the ability to do what he's done previously. And if he can find, some of that pre-GP form, bit of that razzmatazz, which we've seen, he's had some injuries. We've got to remember that. But, if you get him 85% in that bracket of that GP star, we know, I tell you what, he'll have a stellar year. And I think that's why he's come back. He's come back to enjoy the racing. I think Sheffield suits him down to the ground. And if he goes on a roll, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes to number one, if he found some form, because he's that kind of rider. And nothing phases him either. He's got a very, very relaxed sort of character. And look, for me, key rider, if he's scoring big, Sheffield will definitely finish on the top.
And we've just seen some footage here from last season. I think this was maybe in the Knockout Cup semi-final between Sheffield and Ipswich, and keeping the pressure on there on one of the finest, and eventually getting his way, and formidable, as you say, around Sheffield, which is a fast track. You've been a Sheffield rider, you know what it's like. It is the circuit itself. It's the fastest track in British Speedway, as they proudly tell you, and indeed it is. It's flat out all the way, isn't it?
Yeah, but it was one of my first teams when I came over. Surf is definitely obviously a bit different from them, but it is a track where where Polish experience will prevail. It's about keeping your wheels in line, keeping momentum. The dirt line is very important. Last year, the dirt line it changed a little bit throughout the night. So, people like Ty, who's able to move and shift the bike around. Looking forward to the battles, with the big heat 13s and 15s when Ipswich come to town. I think they'll be fantastic. But yeah, Sheffield, always action packed, especially turn 3. You always love a dive bomb in turn 3 at Sheffield.
Okay, one to watch then. And so for Sheffield, for you, are they the team to beat? Well, I guess we'll find out as we work through the rest of the sides. But are they the ones setting the marker down, the reigning champions?
For me, they're favourites. You only have to just the top three. I think puts them over the edge, and I just think they've got riders in there with more potential. And as I said, if they find form, they find a bit of rhythm. For me, I'm not saying they're a shoo-in. A lot can change. They had a lot of injuries last year, made it work for them. But for me, yeah, top spot so far.
You're watching BSN's Breakdown. I'm Ian Brannan. Rory Schlein is with us. We're talking through the Premiership teams for 2024 in the ROWE Motor Oil Premiership in British Speedway. That's the Sheffield Tigers then. What about some new boys? Let's talk about the Oxford Spires. And, Oxford, at the time of recording this, are, the top of the league. What a start.
Was it three out of three, is it? I think so. Yep. I think it's 3 out of 3. I think, yeah. It looks just a solid outfit from 1 to 7. There doesn't seem to be any weak points in that side. If you really want to say, in the Achilles heel, maybe Ashton, thrown in, at the deep end. But I think he's got a lot of potential. But a solid outfit from 1 to 7 in my eyes.
Are they going to cause a surprise? Can they keep it up? And I don't want to say gate crash the playoffs because they want to be in there by rights, of course. They made a fantastic start, but not everybody's going to qualify. Only 4 are going to qualify here, and really they could make a big statement here. And they've got a good they've got Chris Harris, so you'd think they're shoo-ins to the playoffs because Bomber always gets the playoffs somehow. But Magic in there as well. It's a heavyweight side, really, isn't it?
And you can't, discount people like Nicola Clint and Rowan Tungate. Rowan Tungate just coming off a fantastic Australian season, winning the Australian Championship. He's probably one of these riders that is knocking on the door of possibly a GP spot. And Curry down at reserve, what a rider to have. And the key for me is if Curry starts scoring and his average goes up, you've got the likes of Charles, Nicolai, Rowan. What I mean is that they could drop to reserve, and I don't care what anyone says. That would end up being one of the strongest reserves in the league, and he can have 7 rides. So Oxford are so strong in a sense of yes, they might. Yeah, they've got Magic at number 1. It's not like heavy hitters, but it's solid all the way through. And also it takes the pressure off young Ashton. Ashton can just go there and not. The other lads will constantly be firing in big scores. And he can just do his own thing. And you never know. He can find a bit of form, grow into that position. The guy's got so much talent. It wouldn't surprise me if he starts, pressurising Louis, for the better reserves. But at the end of the day, for me, that side is just so solid. It really is.
Louis Kerr, Louis Kerr, obviously a teammate of yours at Berwick this year, so a rider that you know well, but a rider that knows Oxford well. He's won the championship pairs with Charles Wright in a couple of years ago, and we'll see him in action here now.
Yeah, well, the key thing about Louis at reserve is he's ridden for Sheffield, he's ridden for Kings Lynn, and it makes me think, well, when he goes to these places and he's riding at reserve, he's going to have the upper edge just mentally on these young lads. And, I think you couldn't ask for someone better at reserve. He's got the experience. He's number 1 at Berwick. And he's one of his main strengths is gating. And when you're a reserve, a young lad coming into the Premiership, that's the hardest thing to try and knuckle down. But Curry's got that. That's just something that is so natural to him. And that's going to pay dividends in the Heat 2s, the Heat 8s, the Heat 14s, 12s. And if he does go up into the main body of the team, he can hold down a second string spot. Not a problem. He's done it before.
Yeah, we've certainly seen him flying around Oxford. Of course, he's got a lot of experience there. He rode for the Cheetahs last season as well. So, he's got track experience. He was involved in one of the most spectacular crashes as well, I think, of the season last year, where he hit the air fence. I think he clipped, was it Craig Cook's back wheel or something like that, and flew 20 feet in the air. Spectacular stuff, but luckily he was all right in the end, if not bashed around. But certainly a rider who puts it all on the line and never gives up.
No, and that's his mental attributes is just he wants to go into every race. He wants to win every race. And he started the season pretty well. We had a good meeting at Workington the other day, finished really strong. Skating came on. So if anything, that's to look by. He's going to be scoring big.
And as you mentioned, riders still yet to hit their peak. We haven't seen the best of Ashton Bowden yet at that level because he's new, still 16 years old, so can't put any pressure on him. But he's taken to Speedway very quickly. He's only been riding a Speedway bike a couple of years now. But again, another rider who is likely to increase the average, but could make a big difference to the team if he does hit the form that he's capable of.
Exactly. He's literally a number 8, but not, because he's under no pressure. I think they can go to away tracks and they can probably say to Ashton and say, just do your own thing. Don't worry about what you score. And I think he's one for the future. Oxford have been smart here. They've put him in such a good team. He can just learn and take it all in, and they'll still get results. Fantastic what they've done, how they've put that team together. But even people like Nikolai. We've not seen too much of him, but he's the kind of rider that he definitely hasn't hit his peak yet. And Oxford is the kind of track that will suit him down the ground. Used to ride Wolverhampton, so Oxford, small, little bit of a turn it hard, stand it hard on your right foot, get the bike upright. So he's still yet to sort of like find his form. So again, just a solid side for me.
Yeah, tried and tested, isn't it? Tried and tested. So see how they go. I don't. Do you think they're going to do the playoffs? Do you think they'll be in there?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's definitely a playoff side. Depends on how the season goes and see where they end up, but definitely top 4.
Okay, good news for Oxford Spires fans there. Then could be in the top 4. Let's have a look now at a side who. Well, they're aiming for top spot. There's no middle ground with this. The Ipswich Witches, of course, defeated in the playoff final last season, and this year looking to go one better. And you would say as well, I think, a stronger side than last year.
Yeah, I think it looks stronger on paper. Early form suggests, that they're there somewhere abouts. You know what you're going to get from your 2 big guns. It's a side that I think, could be a little bit slower to get going. I know they've had, Emil had that off night, where he had a couple of offs. But definitely a side that will score big away from home. For me at the minute, you look at that engine room of King and Ellis. They're the kind of guys, if they're scoring, and with what Doyley and Emil can do, especially around Ipswich, the Ipswich will suit Ellis down to the ground, grippy, got to turn the bike hard there. And Danny's done that many laps around there. He's probably done more laps than anyone. But the engine room there is very important.
And, well, we've seen it already because they've ridden a couple of meetings home and away, Ipswich at the time of recording this. And we've seen that from Adam Ellis, a very different beast to last year where, even by his own admission, he couldn't really get it going in British Speedway for some reason. He was doing all right on the continent and people were saying, well, why was he included in, some of the national sides around then? But his performances on the continent and in Poland and so on were good. He couldn't quite replicate that here, but now we seem to be seeing him back to his best again. And a former British champion, of course, and a rider that can do it at the biggest occasion.
Yeah, well, look, he won his British Championship at Belle Vue. Big track, fast flowing. Going to Sheffield, you would think that would be a good move. It'd suit him, and he rides the continent tracks very well. But he just didn't find any form whatsoever throughout the year and really struggled. Whether that was mechanical, whether he just didn't settle, I'm not sure. But I think the Ipswich could be good for him. He got the ability to turn a bike. We've seen a race against him at Wolverhampton, can ride that place, as good as anyone. And so far, early signs are looking good. And the way they set that Ipswich track up with the deep clay they've got there, that black clay, he's the kind of guy that will lay the bike over and it won't phase him. As long as his away form's good, as I said, the engine room, him and King at 3 and 4. That is a tough 3 and 4 to beat.
When you have these seasons, though, where it doesn't go to plan, hugely frustrating. And I think maybe that was the case for Adam Ellis. It's just, best laid plans. You have what you think is the right equipment. Then I guess you get into the world of trying to tweak things and change things. It must be really frustrating as a rider when you're doing everything that you can and just sometimes the bike's not performing as you'd hoped.
It's a hard one to try and describe, because I know the fans are, like you said, he's doing really well on the continent, but he can't do it here. He must have the same equipment. It's two different setups, really, because you don't require the power here as what you do in Poland. The engines are set up differently. The weather conditions are different, and obviously the track. People don't realise the bases in the track are way different from what they are on the continent, and people don't realise that. A lot of the tracks in Poland, they hardly use any clay. And they don't rip the outside like they do at Sheffield and Belle Vue and King's Lynn, where they put arrows in and try and make grip. They don't do that abroad. And when you come here, it's sometimes can be hard to adjust to come back to it. If you've been racing Sweden, Denmark, and then Poland, and come back here on a Monday night and have to ride at King's Lynn, with really deep, heavy clay, sometimes it's just hard to adjust and adapt. But that's why people do like coming here, because they get a vast variety of different tracks. But some riders do struggle with it. You go back to reminisce with someone like Lee Richardson. I always thought Lee Richardson was so much better in Poland and Sweden than he was when he was raced in England. He was just a rider that took to the Polish tracks, and here, he seemed to. I'm not saying he wasn't good, but he just excelled better, abroad.
Do Ipswich have a secret weapon, though, in possibly the best rising star of the moment? I think statistically, at the time of recording this, the best performing rising star in the Premiership at the minute, in Dan Thompson, who, yes, he went back to his former track, Leicester, and polished off 9+1 in his last outing at the start of this week, where we're making this programme, but also at home as well. At Ipswich, you got 7+3 against Birmingham. So, these are handy scores to have for a rising star.
For me, it's the surprise packet so far. I know, like you say, statistically, but you put him up against people like Leon Flint, other riders like Jason Edwards, as you say. These guys are probably doing more abroad, but young Thompson has more or less hit the ground running, and no doubt he's quite happy. He got a few over his brother the other night as well. So, look, for me, definitely a surprise package. And sometimes that's the kind of rider that turns your team into a league-winning side. I remember Martin Sleminski, when Birmingham signed him at reserve, people had sort of written him off. Oh, what are Birmingham doing? He went from number 7 to number 1 in like 2 months, and ended up being one of the best riders in the league that year. So I'm not saying Thompson's going to go to number 1, but he could be that rider who just seems to just score every meeting. Has the ability, has the talent to do so, and early signs, he's doing literally that.
Yeah, looking good, and it looks really promising for Ipswich overall, doesn't it? As we mentioned there, I think the key addition of Adam Ellis is going to make a big difference. Of course, they suffered a little bit with Eric Riss last year, not feeling well and having these health issues, of course, which left them a little bit short at times. And Eric, pleasingly, is getting back to his best again now, as we saw in Charles Wright's testimonial when he was riding here. But for Ipswich to have a rider like Adam Ellis now, who's putting in some big points at that part of the team, sort of fills in that link, the area where maybe they were lacking perhaps last year.
Yeah, well, Adam could easily ride at 5. He's that kind of rider. We've seen his ability and his high scoring, prowess, in the past. And then riding, if he could be swapped around 3 and 4. You never know. Rich could swap him around. I know managers are starting to do that. And he's the sort of one he's probably gone into this year. People I'm not going to say written him off, but probably wasn't expecting him to, start as well as he did. No doubt he did, because obviously I know how well he can ride. So, but he's just another rider that will go from strength to strength. Kingy as well. I know he had a couple of hard first rides, but then put it together at home in his last 2. So and he's a guy around Ipswich that on his day he can be nigh unbeatable around that place.
So you fancy Ipswich to be up there battling with Sheffield again?
I think so. They're definitely playoff bound. I just think with them top two, solid engine room, and with young Thompson scoring the way he's doing, they're going to be up there pushing Sheffield.
Okay, well, the team that they defeated just a few days ago were the Leicester Lions, who suffered their first home defeat to Ipswich. And, well, let's talk about this now. Get into the Leicester Lions, because last year, of course, they were flying. They were in there, maybe a bit of a surprise because they took the step back up to the top level again, and they were there or thereabouts. And then, the wheels fell off, didn't they? I think it was against Ipswich where the wheels started to fall off perhaps last season, where they got that defeat, the surprise defeat against Ipswich. And then there were team changes, of course, with Nick Morris and Troy Batchelor coming in, and then Chris Harris went as well. And really, it really changed the dynamic for them. And then they ended up missing out on the playoffs by the narrowest of margins. This year, they'll be looking to guard against that, and this year they've also brought in a few former Wolves as well to try and bolster their ranks.
The wheels did come off in a big way last year. I think Stuart Dixon he made some changes, and I think he will be honest, where I don't think they were the right decisions at that time. I think someone like Bomber, you just know he comes on at the end of the season. He's that kind of rider that he lifts the rest of the side, which I think we saw anyway in the playoffs. So I don't think what we've seen so far, where Stuart will, losing at home for the first time, it's very early on. I actually spoke with him about the weather conditions when we were there, how it's still so very, very cold. The track's definitely not the way it should be, how the guys do want it. So it's not necessarily panic stations, losing at home early on, but there'll be some issues that he'll want to, sort out, make sure they don't sort of fall into a bit of a rut. You can see Max hasn't definitely not hit his form yet. I know he's been trying a new engine from Johnsy, which he says is a fantastic engine, but probably a little bit too strong for this time of year. Still very, very cold, so it's an engine he'll probably use as the weather breaks. So you'll probably find he'll probably jump off that for the next month, I reckon. But look, it's a side that, similar to Oxford, looks very, very stacked, through the 1 to 7. Like you said, former Wolves riders, and they've always, when Wolves have gone to Leicester, they've done very well. So, great additions to the team, and, definitely a side that's going to be there or somewhere abouts.
Let's look at the man you picked out as the star man for Leicester, and it is one of those riders that's made the move from Wolves to the East Midlands, and it's Luke Becker, who is, well, he's on the fringe. A few people thought he might get a wild card in the Grand Prix this year. Talk about Grand Prix heading to the United States at some point, but he's one of the reserves, but a rider that certainly is on that trajectory, heading towards Grand Prix stardom, and another of the protégés of Greg Hancock.
Yeah, Luke's come on leaps and bounds, especially in the last year, on the continent, in England as well. And for me, you watch him in the continent, he rides a big track so well. For an American to come, they race on them small Costa Mesa tracks and all that, there's always that sort of, they struggle when they come here. But Luke's taken it to it so well. And obviously with Greg in his corner, he's going to be learning that relationship. He will never stop learning. And he's lucky to have someone like that always in his corner. And his debut in the Grand Prix for me, I thought was great. He led Smarsnick in one race and was on the pace all night. But this year he'll definitely be the one looking to step up into that number 1 position, number 5 position, because he has the ability to do so, and will be a key rider, especially at number 4, because I think Heat 14s is a race that is underrated. Everyone talks about Heat 13, but Heat 14, you can literally nullify what's happened in 13 with a big race in Heat 14. So for me, definitely one of Leicester's key riders.
And that footage we showed you there, ironically, that was Luke Becker riding for Wolves at Leicester last year and beating Max Frick. So already he'd shown signs of knowing his way around the Pidcock Motorcycles arena. We've got the question on the bottom of the screen there regarding another rider, and it's to do with Richard Lawson, who, at the time of recording this, with Leicester having a few meetings under their belt in all competitions, is there, he is they're out and out number one at the moment. He's been hitting some big scores. And I just want to ask this because he does it in the championship level as well with the Poole Pirates. Wherever he's been, really, he's one of these riders that bangs away the points week in, week out. Maybe doesn't necessarily get the recognition that perhaps he deserves. I know from having a conversation with him last year, I think he was a bit gutted to have missed out on the World Cup squad because he felt he'd done all he could, and that was maybe down to not riding in Poland at the time. But is he an underrated rider in the Premiership?
Stats would say so. He scores maximums pretty much every other week in the championship. And for me, probably one of Leicester's highlights of last year. And as you said, he started the season very well and scoring big, and more or less sort of, running the team himself. He with the points he scored, he's scoring what sort of Max should be scoring. So, and I had actually had a conversation with Stuart about this, how I said that Niels Christian Everson could be the key rider the other night, and it was Richard Lawson. And he said, I have so much faith in Richard that I can put him in any number and I know he'll do a job. And that's probably why people do underrate him, is because you see him one year he rides at 2, and then next year he rides at 4, and then he's at 3. He just seems to be that rider where they just plot in certain parts of the team and he makes it work and he scores. And not riding in the continent, does that sort of give him a negative effect on that experience abroad? Maybe it's an old sort of saying. I've heard it before. I've heard it many a times. But statistically in England, you'd want someone like Richard Lawson in your team, and I think he's proving that so far this season.
We talked about the importance of reserves. Are the reserves maybe a question mark with Leicester as it stands? I know there's an article in the Speedway Star today with Stuart Dixon saying that he wants Drew Kemp to up his game because he's seen Drew having some dodgy performances, maybe mechanical issues with Berwick. Of course, Stuart is the team manager, your team manager at Berwick, but also Drew rides for both sides. One of the riders that rides for both sides, and he's sort of seeing similar issues in both camps. And he's said, look, you need to get this is the year where you need to be stepping up if you're gonna go on to be a top star of Speedway. And that's that. I don't know. He said that in the Speedway Star. So I don't know. You know Drew as well, because obviously you ride with him. So what do you feel?
Well, it's he looked really good on press and practice. He looked very fast, but did suffer some mechanical issues that night, and he's actually had them every time I've seen him this year, and he'll be no doubt frustrated. I know he's frustrated. He was actually in the pits after Workington, going over his bike with a fine-tooth comb. So I know he's no doubt been in the workshop all week, and I know Stuart's had a word, about obviously what they expect from Drew. He's got so much talent, and I will back anyone that says that he has. He does. He has so much talent. But there are some issues that do let him down. Obviously, mechanically this year has really let him down. But look, I think if he sorts that out, Crean normally rises to the top. I think his talent. He seems a little bit different. He seems a bit more confident in himself this year. With the time I've spent with him. So look, I think get rid of the gremlins. I think you'll see a different Drew Kemp.
Okay, so where do you see Leicester fitting in at the end of the season then? Have they got the legs to last the course this year?
I think so. I think they're a side that will sort of be in that 5th, 4th spot. It just depends on how they come out of this sort of sketchy start. For me, I was expecting a little bit more from them, but I think Stuart will probably have learned from last year. Don't hit the panic button. Let's see what happens. Wait for the weather to break. The side is talented. There's no doubt about it. They just got to put the points on the board. So they're definitely playoff for sure.
Okay, watch this space then on the Leicester Lions fronts, and hopefully for them they can go one further this time and make the playoffs and see what happens from there. Because as we know, Ipswich last year just snuck in there, didn't they? And then went right to the final. You don't have to be finishing at the top. Belle Vue finished top of the table and, of course, made the semi-finals and no further. So just getting in there, once you're in those playoffs, it is, as they say, it's all on the night, isn't it? A bit of a lottery.
A little bit. You only see what Sheffield did. They had only one of their first 1 to 7s in the team, and they were able to put a team together that on the 2 nights were just better than Ipswich. I've been in sides where we finished top of the table and then lost. Belle Vue, same. They finished top of the table and didn't even make the final. So, them playoffs can, bite you in the backside quite hard.
Right, let's move on then to the National Speedway Stadium and to the Belle Vue Aces. Of course, they had to wait a long time for that league championship. You've been a Belle Vue rider in that era where they were waiting for that silverware to come, and it didn't quite get there for one reason or another, but they finally did it, of course, in 2022, and they want to do it again sooner than 29 years this time. But what do we reckon of the team so far? The question we're asking generally here is probably regards the number 1 spot, because I've seen a few people talking about Belle Vue and they refer to Dan Bewley being the number 1, but he's not. And maybe that is the headline, that he's not number 1. Brady Kurtz is the number 1, and that is the challenge really for Dan Bewley as the Grand Prix star to get back there, because maybe last year he was a little bit subpar at home.
Yeah, Dan, he's a Grand Prix rider. He's world class. So when people say he's not a number 1, well, his average says he is. And he's a Grand Prix winner. He's an absolute beast on a bike. I love watching him ride. Absolutely love it, especially around Belle Vue. You want your money's worth. Go and watch him at Belle Vue. But there is one thing that I think here in England that does what puts that in people's minds. Not being a number 1 is his away form, and I think that is that bit where Belle Vue will always be strong at home. They've built a side that I think are going to be strong at home. I think we've already seen that in the Peter Craven. All the guys had a fantastic, opening meeting there, and I just think that's the issue there. I think I don't think his away form, reciprocates what he does at home. He's nearly nigh unbeatable around Belle Vue. He's one of the fastest guys around there. Where you see Brady's a little bit more versatile. He can ride them technical tracks and them smaller tracks. He has that ability. And I think that's, from his time riding, at Poole, that track can be quite technical sometimes. And, that's probably where the argument comes into it.
Okay, so who will finish number 1 at the end of the season officially with the number 1 on their back? Dan Bewley or Brady Kurtz is the question we're asking there. And by all means, leap into the comments and let us know what you think. Your star man, though, Rory, I mean, there's no shortage of Australian talent among the Belle Vue Aces. Maybe no surprise with Mark Lemon being, of course, in charge of the team there. And they brought in, a couple of Aussies. Someone was slightly similar to you in Connor Bailey, who's an Australian turned Brit. But also Ben Cook coming into the side as well. But Jamin Lidsey is your man to watch this year.
I just think Jamin is the key rider. He is the rider that's going to turn Belle Vue into a playoff pushing side. Or if he doesn't fire, he doesn't find form, especially away from home. I think we've seen what he can do at home. World class at home. He's coming off a fantastic Aussie season as well. Took some big scalps while he was back home. And he's another one of these riders that is slowly pushing towards a GP berth. He's knocking on the door. He's changed clubs this year in Poland, so that could help him. That track that he's gone to in Grugins, it's not a big swooping track like he was at Lejno. So that will help him. And, he's obviously got the comfort riding Belle Vue every week. But he's similar to Dan a little bit. His away form is a little bit questionable. And if he starts firing away, Belle Vue will be a force, especially on the road.
And so, yeah, I mean, that away form is the thing, isn't it? Because I think people probably expect Belle Vue to win at home more often than not. Though that said, though, the National Speedway Stadium can be a leveller, can't it? Because it is a track that everybody loves going there to race on.
It's a frustrating track. It's fun. It's fun to ride. Frustrating to race. As a speedway rider, people will understand that. But yes, it is a track where you can go to, and if the weather's a little bit different and it catches the home riders out, the away riders seem to just jump all over the top of them. I've seen it before. I've been involved with it where Belle Vue have sort of been on a roll. We've turned up. Track slightly different. They don't get the setups right, and they can get rolled. They can get beat. They're not unbeatable at home, but the side just looks they will be dominant at home. If they're winning big and then maybe they're going for bonus points instead of away wins, it's a side that seems to be built like that. So bonus points will be key definitely for Belle Vue.
You've ridden for some of the the biggest names in British Speedway, Belle Vue Aces, Pool Pirates. You've ridden for Wolves. These are historic names really in British Speedway. They've always been there, but particularly I think Belle Vue and Pool. There's a sort of an expectance almost of silverware or of at least being there in the finals. How does that relate to you as a rider? Is that extra pressure? Is that good pressure? What's it like when you're riding for those bigger clubs?
It depends on the promotion really. Like not ridden for the current promotion at Belle Vue, but the current promotion at Pool. It's the way they throw the pressure at you. But with the way Belle Vue run at the minute, they're so professional. They expect things done in a certain way. Obviously, as you said, they've got their first title. They won a few years ago. I believe they finished top of the table last year and failed to get into the final. That'll hurt. That will sting, and that will still sting now. And Lemo will be on. He'll have to be honest. That will hurt more than being third or fourth in the playoffs, and then not getting through. But to finish top and then not get through, that will hurt. And I think that's why maybe they don't want to lose at home. That's why they've built the side the way they have. And the fans there, especially, you see what the fans are like at Belle Vue. They demand winning at home. They don't like losing at home. I know no club likes losing at home, but the Belle Vue fans can be quite vocal, and they'll show it. If Belle Vue start to slip.
And so with this side assembled, then it is, as I say, it's a strong side. We've talked about the Australians, we talked about the Brits, but also let's not forget Norwick Bladorn, who's there at reserve. Connor Bailey also there, also taking his chance at that level. And we've said about reserves making a difference. And certainly Norwick in the Peter Craven, for example, he was there laying it on the line against some of the very best.
And it's a track that he'll love, and already having a season to settle in, he can go there now and feel part of the furniture. It's amazing when you're made to feel at home. The confidence before you even got to the track, you walk around, you know where the coffee machine is and things like that. So he's a guy that I'll expect him to ride well at home. His stats and what I've seen of him away from home, again, just doesn't look great. But he started the season really well. So, build on that. Confidence is always key, to have a great season. It's up to him at the end of the day. But especially at home, he will be a key factor, especially riding it too.
So will there be joyous Mexican hat waving at the end of the season, Rory? That's the question.
I don't know. I don't think I've ever worn one.
Well, it's the first time for everything.
No, I don't think they like me.
Oh, we'll glide on. Let's move then to Kings Lynn next. The Kings Lynn Stars. Well, yeah, they've had a funny old time, haven't they? The last few years, they've built good, what looks at least on paper like decent sides, solid teams, and then maybe the test has come and it's fallen apart. Last year it was Christoph Kasperzak. Were they going to get the former world number 2, or were they going to get the slightly on-off Kasperzak, well, that's exactly the one they got. Then there were changes, and Laguta came in, and it just seemed like they kind of even things out right at the end of the season. And whereas this year, stark contrast to that, they've brought in a number of riders from Peterborough. So it's a nucleus of a team that know each other well. The likes of Benjamin Basso, Niels Christian Iversen, Tobias Musilak coming in at number 1 as well. It is a different look, Lynn Stars, but quite a familiar one if you're a Peterborough Panthers fan.
Yeah, it looks, on paper, it's not going to jump out at you straight away. But it's a side that has riders that can score big. Tobias, we've seen what he did at Sheffield last year, more or less riding at number 1 most of the year. Biasso's an exciting rider. For me, potentially a future GP star for sure. And then you've got people like Niels Christian Iversen, former GP rider, former world number 2, I believe. And look, they could be a surprise package or a dark horse. It just depends on how they start the season. Obviously, we watched them on the first night at Leicester. They were there somewhere about. But I think we'll know more probably after a month. See how they develop, how they unfold into the season. But for me, it will depend on how they do the track. I think in recent years they've gone through some promotion changes as well in the background. Rob Lyon's come over as well. There seems to be a little bit more better structure behind the scenes as well, which will, I think, settle riders down, will settle fans down. But yeah, I always see, being a former Kingsland rider, the track for me is the tell point. And if they get the track where they have it dialed in each week and it's the same each week, they'll keep the 7 riders happy. But yeah, it'll depend on how that unfolds throughout the year.
I think that's going to be one of the key things. And I know that talking to Rob Lyon at the end of last season, he was very keen that the track was going to be consistent. That was one of his sort of, I don't know, not necessarily a deal breaker in taking the gig, but it was certainly something that he was keen to put across when he was getting involved.
Yeah, I'd say in the last 3 to 4 years, the track seemed, they use this similar to Ipswich, but they've got a lot more dents and a lot more clay at Kings Lynn. They obviously run the stock cars. They have to compromise for both. And it was always an issue when I rode there. You knew when the stock cars had been there the week before, you knew you were going to be in for a physical challenge. But yeah, I have heard that they have tried changing the shale a little bit, which is a plus because I think it'll benefit bikes more than it will the cars. But yeah, always, that there seemed to be so much grip on the inside and not enough on the outside, and it was all in the wrong places. But Rob's a smart guy. He knows what he'd want for his riders. But Kings Lynn is a fantastic shape as well. That's why I went and rode there for 4 years. It's a lovely shaped track, and surprisingly fast. And people don't realise how quick that place is, especially going into turn 1. But yeah, they get that track right, and the riders are happy. Yeah, they could be a bit of a dark horse.
Your starman then is a rider who, when we were at the Premiership Media Day, people may have seen this photo of the riders who have won World Championship medals. And this rider in question had so many World Championship medals from either World Cups or World Pairs or whatever, that he was actually lending out World Championship medals to riders who had forgotten to bring theirs, and that is Niels Christian Iversen, who's he's certainly been there, seen it, and done it, and won pretty much everything apart from the World Championship itself. He's finished second as his best in the individual, but as a team rider, one of the very best in the world.
I've been lucky enough to ride with Niels, not just in England but abroad as well, and I've described him in the past as one of the fastest riders I've ever seen. Some of the moves I've seen him do in Sweden and Poland are just out of this world. And I know he's had shoulder issues, for a few years, and he's been battling with that. He'll be honest, he's not the rider he was of yesteryear. But if they can same as Chris Holder. If they can find him into that 80%, 85% of that former GP guy at number 2, he is going to be awesome. And he rides probably, if he's on song and on form, he rides Kings Lynn. There's no one better than rides Kings Lynn than himself. I remember there was a spell we were going through there. He was trying to break the track record, and each week he was 0.1 off or 0.2 off the track record. So the guy knows the quickest way around that place. And yeah, if he can find anything like he was back when he was in the GP days, he's going to be the guy that pushes them close to the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, formidable rider. We're just seeing him there in action for Peterborough last season. I think that was up against Leicester, wasn't it? Where it really did come unstuck for Leicester that night, unfortunately for them. But coupled with the newcomers as well, but again, a rider that he will have ridden with at the end of last season in Tarasenko. We saw what he can do in that fixture at Leicester that we showed on BSN, and he was a very, very fast rider. And so with that, and Basso, we know what he can do. Anders Rowe, an experienced rising star as they go. So they do have a good set of, similar in a way, in theory, to the likes of Oxford. They've got the riders who are tried and tested in British Speedway, and that can deliver the points. And so therefore there's no reason why Kings Lynn fans shouldn't be able to look forward to certainly at least a better season than the last few years.
No, not at all. They've got a side that potentially could make the playoffs, but they got to connect all the dots and make sure they're happy. We saw what Tarasenko could do, and I think he's going to be one of them riders. When they go to Sheffield and they go to Belle Vue, Niels is on fire. We know what Tobias can do, and then if Tarasenko pulls up and then starts banging in 12s, 13s, and 14s away from home. Hello, Kings Lynn. They've come to the party, and as you said, ROWE, who's an experienced rising star, a lot of experience racing abroad as well. So he's the kind of guy that Kings Lynn will be looking to win them Heat 2s, picking up them points in Heats 8s and 12s. And if he's doing that, it takes the pressure off the other guys in the top half of the team as well. So again, it's all for them to go and get it, and to go get the points. What looks good on paper doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do it at the track. So I think Kings Lynn could be a slow burner, but, bit of a dark horse.
Are they going to avoid the wooden spoon, though, is the question we're asking?
I think they've just got a little bit more quality. I think so. I think they have got a little bit more quality that they will. If they go on a run of form, who knows? They could go further than just finishing above wooden spoon. But for me, they've just got a bit more quality.
Okay, so that's the Kings Lynn Stars. Just one team left to talk about then, and that is the Birmingham Brummies, who, of course, made the move up to the ROWE Motor Oil Premiership in 2024. Largely, I say forced on them, but it was certainly very little opportunity to do anything else when Mondays were their given race night by the owners of the stadium, because Greyhound's running on Wednesdays, their race night up until now for many years. So they're left with little option really to make the step up. They've done that because that decision was relatively late. It left them at a bit of a disadvantage because a number of riders were already signed up, and so they were left, working on what was left available. We'll have a look at the lineup there, and of course they're led by Steve Worrell, who, of course, and I think actually when you look at the middle part of their team, really, they've got a good thread of British talent through there, haven't they? Steve Worrell, Tom Brennan, Leon Flynn, all riders who know the score in British Speedway. And the question really is, can the newcomers make the difference in the likes of Pavlicki and Lampart and so on?
I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on your Milik and your Pavlicki when he comes back. They're going to be needing and wanting them to be scoring big. Early signs so far, I think it's 2 home defeats so far, which is not a good sign early on. They really, really need to be winning at home to have any sort of chance of making the playoffs. But yeah, it has got a good core of British riders there in the middle. Riding with Stevie, you know what you're going to get from him. I was at Oxford on that sort of wet night, and he showed his quality and class there. But I think, you're looking through that lineup Pavlicki, once he comes back, he's not going to have time to settle. They're going to want him to be scoring big. For me, that yes, the side's been put together at last minute, which is unfortunate, and I think they've done extremely well to put the side they've put together to be competitive, and I think we have seen that. The first few matches, they've surprised quite a few people already. May have not got the points on the board, but they've pushed some quality teams close. And if they can keep that confidence and keep that belief, look what we've done so far, and maybe a couple of home wins, that can start the season. So look, they've got things to build on and things to look forward to with Pavlicki coming back. So it's just a telltale whether that they can turn that into a positive and get points on the board.
Obviously, at this point, we haven't seen Pavlicki ride yet. He's due back in the next fixture, so hopefully in the next week or so we should see him. And maybe by the time people are watching this, we'll have some answers on whether Pavlicki can do it or not. But certainly in the first fixtures back in Poland, he had this muscle injury which set him back, and it did set him back out of the Polish fixtures as well. So it's not like a sort of an injury of convenience because he couldn't be bothered to ride, as some people have sort of suggested. But he's come back on the bike in Poland, and he's been performing pretty well. I think he scored 9 points or so in his first fixture, and then it was the Polish Golden Helmet at the weekend. Bartosz Smarslik finished 7th, by the way, and I think Pavlicki was 8th. So he wasn't far behind, Smarslik. Obviously, Smarslik having a bit of an off night by his standards, and he'll probably have a one off night and 99 great nights will Smarslik. But it shows that Pavlicki's got the speed to be, hanging with these top GP and top Polish Extraliga stars.
He's going to be at number one. He rides with these guys week in, week out over there. He is a big name in Poland. He's got the experience to be a number one. And look, the injury sort of come out. No one was aware of this injury, and it was a bit of a surprise for everyone. And I know how Poland operate. I know how the clubs are. They won't let him come back until they know he's fully fit and fully ready to go. Which obviously we've seen now. He's had a couple of meetings. Surely he should be, be given the green light. And it'd be great to have him back. And I can't say it enough. He's going to have so much pressure on him, especially when, the lines up between, he's got Doyley and Emil either side of him. If he can nullify, them heat 13s and heat 15s where at home, he jumps out in front, he keeps that as a 3-3. Milik maybe picks up a third where they get a 4-2. They're the big races. And you know what? I'm looking forward to these big heat 13s and 15s this year.
We've seen Birmingham, yes, they've been beaten in their fixtures. They have got 1 point on the board from tying after 15 regular heats with Sheffield, which is, that's not an easy thing to do. So they should maybe take, encouragement from that. But they lost the super heats and very, very close to actually getting a win against Sheffield. They were 10 points up at one point, and Sheffield fought their way back into it. But you fancy that maybe with a rider like Pavlicki, if he does what he's supposed to do and be that world-class number one to spearhead them, and they've had Scott Nicholls filling in, and he's obviously done a very solid job. But if you've got a rider that can match the likes of Woofenden or Holder or Janowski or whoever else they've faced so far, that could just be the extra few points they need, because they've not taken a pasting at any point. It's all been pretty close. Those extra 4 or 5 points could really be the difference.
Couldn't agree more. He's a guy that's going to come in and make an impression straight away. He has the world-class quality. But the key thing for me would be, if I was a Birmingham promoter, I'd be thinking, how can I keep Scott Nicholls at reserve and keep Pavlicki in? I don't know if that's doable. I tell you what, that could be an immense move if they could do that, and that would transform that side into something a little bit more special than what it was at the start of the year. I know it's very early on and be harsh on someone, but I tell you what, that would be an interesting move.
It would be. I just think that Scott is on the telly, isn't he? And I think that's partly why he's available at this time of the season and not later.
Scotty, it makes sense.
A rallying cry from Rory Schlein there to get Scotty back on the bike on a Monday night. Let's talk about some of the riders that we're going to be seeing on track for Birmingham then, because we've seen a few of them in action already, and I think Lampard is one example of a rider that he's had some mixed performances, but when he's been good, he's been very good.
Yeah, he's got a bit of the KK syndrome, really. Like when he gets clear, he's gone. They're not going to catch him, and we've seen the quality so far, but it's just the consistency. And a lot of these Polish riders do have that sort of way of racing here in England where they'll win a race and then they might not do anything for the rest of the night. And he's got all the quality. He races in Poland, races in Sweden. For me, he's a bit of an enigma because we've seen him what he did at Leicester. One race outstanding, and then the next two races he do a lot. So as a team manager, that would be very frustrating. So Sam and Chris are definitely going to have to work out maybe swapping the numbers around a little bit, see where he would benefit from riding, and just see how that materialises.
One thing we're obviously seeing this race here with Lampard flying away out front there, but there's been a lot of work done on the track at Birmingham over the last few years, really. But certainly over the course of the winter, they've been going to make more improvements. One thing that has come out, I've seen in interviews or read in interviews, the riders seem to be loving it, and I think really whatever they've done with the track, they need to just keep it as it is now at Birmingham, because Woofenden, Ty Woofenden said after the Sheffield meeting, he actually singled it out along with Oxford, saying, these tracks, absolutely, they were beautiful to ride. And so for somebody like Woofy, who's been previously pretty vocal about his criticism of tracks and the standard of tracks, to the point where he decided he wasn't going to ride here, if he's coming here and saying this track's absolutely amazing, I love it, then I would be very loath to go twiddling with it, because it sounds like Birmingham have got the formula right there.
Yeah, I think finally the penny's dropped here in British Speedway, where it's not all about ripping it, making huge loads of dirt, and that's the only way to make Speedway great. And now it's about making the track as consistent as possible, because the way these engines are, that's how the riders have to ride. They have to ride them on the tap all the time. So a more consistent track will get you closer and better racing. And I think we're seeing that already. If Ty Wolfenden's coming out and saying the track's good, that's enough for me. There was a couple of years ago where Birmingham, the track was starting to get wavy and bumpy, and the base was starting to show. But they've spent the money where it counts. They've spent it on the track. They've invested in their product, and I think you do that. That's the first thing you should do as a promoter. Build it from the track upwards. Good track, happy riders, happy fans. That's a given. And Birmingham has always been a lovely shaped track. You walk it and it looks a bit odd, but you wind up, you build the speed up, and it can create a lot of different race lines there for sure.
And I think obviously a big year for Birmingham. They've stepped up to the top level. They're hoping to get the crowds in, which is obviously the bottom line. They need people to turn up here because this is a big step up, big financial commitment. Yeah, they get more money from TV, but they also need the people through the gates. And not just that, but also to show the council that and the owners of the stadium that this is a going concern here. I think the Greyhounds are due to move out of there later this year, even though they've made Birmingham change race night. They're going to leave, I think, midsummer, end of the summer. So the Speedway will be the only thing left there. There is an owner who is interested in continuing that for the time being, at least, and a sort of avoiding getting it developed too soon. But to do that, I think you make a good case that this is a viable thing and I'm going to make some money out of this. Then the owner's going to think, well, sounds like a good idea to have Speedway here for a few more years yet.
Yeah, without fans, Speedway doesn't exist. And, they pay the bills. And, we rode there last year and it was a sad sight to see, with the stadium not full. And it's a shame, really, because it's a fantastic racetrack and there's always good racing there. And the promotion have done everything they can at the last minute to put a side that is competitive together. And, bringing in Sam Malenko, Chris Adams as well from Wolverhampton. Look, they're ticking all the right boxes. They just they need the fans to come in and start putting the money through the turnstiles.
And they are doing that. They had their biggest crowd ever for their opening night, and I think the crowds have been pretty strong. And also bolstered by Wolves fans, of course, who now have no home to go to. But with a few familiar faces from Wolves riding there, with Zach Cook, Leon Flints, Steve Worrell moving over to Perry Barr. There are some good numbers of Wolves fans now who are maybe biting their tongue slightly, but they're going there nonetheless to support the Speedway.
I know the fans at Wolves very well, and I tell you what, they'll be going through a hard time. Obviously, being a former Wolves rider and Coventry rider, I know what the Wolves fans will be going through with what Coventry have gone through the years. So they're lucky that they've only got some neighbours close by. If they do get, it gets a bit too much, they can go and see some Speedway. So, Wolves fans, please don't shy away. Go there, support Birmingham. And even the Cov fans, go get your bum trackside.
Yeah, absolutely. And that search obviously continues for a new venue, but it does seem to be taking maybe a little longer than everyone would have hoped. But the fight is still going on there with Chris Van Straten and all those involved with Wolves continuing to look for somewhere for the future. But it may be some time yet. But best of luck to all those involved in that, of course. Well, I think that rounds everything up there for Birmingham. Obviously, they're aiming for the playoffs. I think that's their ultimate aim. But I think just a few scalps on the way would certainly keep the fans entertained.
I think so. Out of all due respect, I think they're a side that is probably looking at the bottom of the table. But look, I think I said it when we were at Leicester. Birmingham have been in this position before where they put a team together and everyone completely ripped them off. They did. It was the year when I think Doyley sprung on the world stage. That was his first year where he started dominating in England and scoring big abroad. And Szymanski come from number 7 up to number 1. And look, anything's possible. And Birmingham have got a side that potentially could do something like that. But at the minute, probably early signs say, they're going to be knocking on the door of probably maybe a wooden spoon this year.
Okay, but keep the faith. You never know what can happen in Speedway. It's a crazy sport, as we well know. So, Rory, well, thanks a lot. And you've already won some silverware this year. And I noticed from one podcast voting you Team of the Month for March, and which is pretty impressive considering Berwick have ridden 2 meetings in the course of 24 hours. Oxford wondering what they have to do to win it, but it's a win-win for the Courtneys, I suppose. But yeah, you won the Border Trophy, so that's something to start off the year.
Yeah, the trophy was only about that big,
I know, it must be the smallest trophy. It's like the Ashes of Speedway.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's like the Ashes. We know. I know what they're like, so it's all right.
Good stuff, and you're back in action, and you've got Glasgow next up at the time of recording this, but that'll be after we've released it, probably. Well, let's talk about something else.
Yeah.
So let's round up by looking at what's coming up on BSN in the week ahead. And it is a busy period. In fact, April as a whole is rock and roll Speedway all the way through. But certainly this first week, things get underway on Monday as we head to the National Speedway Stadium for the Belle Vue Aces versus the Leicester Lions. And then we head on the short hop and a skip down to Poole for our first trip to Wimborne Road of 2024. And it's the first fixture for the Plymouth Gladiators this season as well, because they've not been able to ride at home yet. Let's see how they get on away as the Pirates take on the Gladiators on Wednesday. And then on Friday, it's back up north again for the Redcar Bears against Workington Comets. And then heading over to the following week on the Thursday, we're at Ipswich at Foxhall as we see the Ipswich Witches face the Oxford Spires. And then for our first trip to Glasgow of 2024 and a local derby as well, the Glasgow Tigers versus the Berwick Bandits. And that will feature, of course, Rory Schlein as captain of the Berwick Bandits, heading back to the reigning champions early in the season. You must be looking forward to pitting your wits against them, because it's a different side in some respects as well. They've made changes too.
Yeah, they've had, obviously they've lost one of their main riders in Benny Basso, but Look, Berwick with Jamie and Stuart have put, what looks so far, a solid side. And look, the meetings against Workington, we've used that as sort of a bit of a warm up. Yeah, great to win a trophy, but we know it's business, as usual come this Saturday. And look, you will take every meeting as it comes. We've had a good couple of talks. The lads know what is expected of them. I think there is a different bit of a feel around the place, and we were quite happy after the first home meeting as well. Track's still coming together because they relayed it over the winter, so the track's only going to get better and better and better. And early signs look really good. Bastion looks good, and then we've got young Hodder, who, to be fair, is absolutely blasted the first two meetings. And big things to come from him for sure.
Exciting times, and you can see how Rory and his Berwick Bandits get on against the reigning champions, the Glasgow Tigers, later on this month. And all the details, of course, on the BSN website, watch.britishspeedway.co.uk. Thanks once again for joining us, Rory, and we'll see you on the track soon.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
And, we'll leave you with our hot heat of the week. Here's the lineup then. Luke Harrison off the inside in blue for the Scunthorpe Scorpions. Ben Trigger in yellow from gate 2. Gate 3 in red is Jake Allen. And off the outside in white, it's Charles Wright of the Redcar Bears. Heat 4, 2 points in it. Still plenty of time left on the countdown. We're getting underway with no messing about here. Heat 4. Away from the start then. A lively one from Ben Trigger, and coming round the outside is Charles Wright and the Redcar Bears on a 5-1. Can Jake Allen get involved here? He's trying to come round the outside. He's got around Ben Trigger there to get himself into second place. Setting his sights now on Charles Wright, but Charles Wright has the lead after the first lap.
Yeah, Jake looks pretty pacey at the minute. Similar to Kyle in the first one, so starting to use a bit more of the track, but it seems all around mid-track. And we got a bit of a battle going in the back as well.
Yeah, Luke Harrison is tussling with Ben Trigger at the back there. Ben Trigger holding him off at the moment. Luke Harrison being wheeled up the inside, and there he does. A bit of a dive bomb. Can he hold on though? Because coming back up the inside is Ben Trigger for the Redcar Bears.
And Jake Allen's going around the outside.
Jake Allen comes round the outside of Charles Wright here, down the back straight. Wheel-to-wheel stuff, and Charles Wright trying the dive bomb up the inside. It's handlebar to the finish line, and Jake Allen gets there. Wow, what a finish.
I did say it'd take 1 or 2 races to get going.
Woo. Yeah, it's raceable. And Jake Allen does it in the closing stages of heat number 4.
That was fun.
It was. All action stuff there. 2 races going on.
I didn't know where to look.
No, I'm not exactly sure what happened at the back.
No, we were watching it for a second.
I'm not sure how that one ended.